I thought it was really hilarious this morning. I got my speaker note and it said, "What is your dream job?" I actually already have my dream job. I get to work with schools to design schools for the future. And as an educator, you couldn't imagine doing something more inspiring than this. And since we're all educators in the room, where many of us are, I know I'm an educator, we have many here that are, you won't mind if I start with a pop quiz for all of you. Go ahead and raise your hand. What environments do you need to develop basketball skills? Go ahead. What's a gymnasium? Great, what else? Baskets. A ball. All of you get an A+ this morning. Congratulations. To design environments to foster the skills of basketball, we give young people gymnasiums. We give them balls. We give them baskets. Sometimes it's outside. Sometimes it's indoors. Sometimes people say a competitor, a coach, a crowd if you're trying to become a professional and you need to perform under pressure. These are the environments we need to develop basketball skills in young people. And as it turns out, schools are exceptionally talented at designing basketball courts so we can develop that skill. We're really good at that. I'm not sure I've ever visited a school that doesn't have a basketball hoop somewhere. So we like to ask a similar question when we think about designing schools for the future, which is, what environments do you need to develop skills for the future? This is a question I wish schools ask more often. So I offer a couple data points to consider. Recently, the ISTE, the International Society for Technology and Education, said every job will require humans to work with AI or alongside AI at some point in the future. We're also coming off the coat ends of COVID. This is an environment, this is the only image in this presentation that is not from a school that we've designed. This is an image of an actual learning space that coincidentally is using that basketball court for very questionable purposes, which is to isolate and consolidate students into a controlled environment that is certainly not very inspiring. As it turns out, the drivers of school design now in the world that we're in tend to be related to COVID and tend to be related to this explosion of technology that we have access to. More and more communities are thinking, we need to design to support well-being of our community. We need to design to support engagement. It was just mentioned. Students revolt if they aren't engaged in school. They learned during COVID that they can actually still play the game and not even show up. So why go to school? We are also responding to the fact that schools are a center of community, a center of culture. Right? So how do we create an environment that can create the conditions for that? And then on the technology side, of course, AI is disrupting all sorts of things in school, everything from assessment to the way that we assign work. But we also have social media continuing to have an impact on young people and their personal and mental health, while also being able to be connected to anybody in the world at any given time. And then we augment that with the network mobility that now exists. I and my phone can do more than I could have possibly dreamed of doing when I was a 12-year-old. I can literally create, record, and share anything I want. There's an incredible power associated with that. So you may ask yourself then, so what does a future-ready school look like? As it turns out, it's not VR labs. As it turns out, it's not necessarily highly technology-based spaces, because so many of the things that technology offer us require us to think about humanity. So we want schools where young people can explore purpose. We want schools where young people can build relevant skills to the things that our society needs. And we want schools that actually foster human well-being. These are the drivers of the school of the future. And this is what we try and design for. So I'm going to talk through these topics today. And we want to start with exploring purpose. So what does it look like to design an environment that fosters the conditions of purpose? So there's a theory, it's a sociological theory called self-determination theory. And the idea is that if you create the conditions for self-determination, autonomy, the ability to make choices for yourself, competence, those skills, the actual knowledge that's required that Lucy mentioned this morning. You still need some skills and competence, but also relatedness. Are the things that you're being asked to do connected to stuff you care about? If we create these conditions, then self-determination theory says, then the effects will be motivation. You'll actually choose to go do something, setting goals and attaining those goals, and ultimately success. So when self-determination is applied in schools, what we learn is that young people have higher performance in academics, that they have higher levels of persistence and grit and resilience through challenging problems, and they report higher levels of well-being. So what does it look like to design an environment that actually supports a self-deterministic school experience? One of the first things that we find most important for young people is relevance. Do we create conditions where young people can explore things like how they can heal the climate crisis by planting natural plants and trees and restoring the environment? How do we create environments where young people can explore their interests, things that they are actually wanting to do and create, and at the same time give them some personal ways of doing that? So on the left, you have a group of boys that are using a 3D laser cutter to create plywood parts for a robot. On the right, you have a young man that's exploring new forms of artwork so he can express his emotions to his peers. Those are both interests of those young people, and we want to make sure that they can all of those students can do that. Risk is an incredibly important factor of schools. And we want students to take risks, but we want them to not be critically damaged after taking them. So safe risk is important, and we need to teach young people to be willing to take risks and know that they'll be okay, and schools are a safe place to do those things. We need to think about environments that allow young people to express themselves. This is about expressing what they care about, and it's not just in essays and in tests. You don't express yourself with a grade necessarily. So things like movement and dance and other performances are incredibly powerful for young people to really learn what their purpose may be, at least at any given moment. We want spaces that help people connect. So social hearts in schools, where children can come together potentially with partners, with community, with adults, and celebrate things. This space has places that feel a little bit like a lobby in a coffee shop, but also places with a stage so you can have celebrations and share with the world what your children and what your school is doing. And this connects to the notion of belonging. Spaces where young people and educators can come together and not only understand their connection to the broader community, but their connection to the people within their proximity, within their tribe, within their classrooms. We need to create spaces that give young people an opportunity to act on their individual needs. All 5 girls in this image are using the same space but in very different ways because they all have slightly different needs. Some need to work together. One needs to work in a more quiet space because they get overstimulated when they're out in the open area. We see more and more schools building spaces where you're simulating the jobs of the future. This is a high school in the States where they're offering a nursing training program, and they've literally built in their high school medical facilities so students can practice and understand what it means to work in that field. If you're exploring purpose, you need places to reflect on what mattered to you. I always think about book, window, mirror. What did I learn? How does that shape the way I see the world? And how does that shape my own understanding of myself? And then one of the most powerful drivers of purpose is play. If we can't allow children to continue to play from the youngest learners all the way up to the adults, then we can't actually act out and explore what might be interesting to us or invent new ideas about what we may be and how we may interact in the world. But purpose by itself is not inherently the only thing that you need to do in schools. You also need to have skills. So we've looked to things like the World Economic Forum to determine what are the actual skills that are growing in demand in the world. And I think this is a really interesting list. These are the top 10 skills on the rise. What is number 1? It's creative thinking, right? So we have to create basketball courts for creative thinking. We have to create basketball courts for curiosity and lifelong learning. We have to create basketball courts for resilience and flexibility and agility, right? These are imperative for young people to develop and be prepared to succeed in the world that we've created for them and that they will end up creating for themselves. So what are the environments to build these skills? So self-determination. Can you create spaces where a group of students can choose to be in a classroom, but also can determine that they need to be outside of that classroom to maybe have an individual conversation or work with a group of peers? We want to think about this idea of agency, where everybody in this learning environment can choose a different position and use a different material to execute the task that they've been asked to do. Motivation is a massive driver of skills development, and we need to motivate students to build skills with real equipment, with the real things that they will experience outside of the K through 12 or the primary and secondary environment. We need to think about systems and analytical thinking through play at young ages and in old ages. We have to create environments where students can not only consume technology and media and learn how to type with Google, but also to be authors of content and share with the world so that they can be creative. We need to create spaces where students have the skill of self-awareness, where in this class, these students are given an opportunity to self-select into the smaller learning environment on the left and get additional support from a professional that is there to help that student that has learning gaps. And they teach the students to identify when I need extra help and to just go to that space when you need it. We need spaces for collaboration to spread out and put all the ideas on the table and solve a problem. Flexibility and adaptability. How do you create a blank canvas of a space into something that engages people and inspires them and pulls on their emotions? And you'll hear later today about things like curiosity and creativity, where it's safe to tinker, to break things, to build things, and to spill paint every once in a while. There are two more really important ones, and I think this is becoming more and more critical for young people, and that is the conditions to practice service. How do you give back to your community and create environments where young people can learn how to provide to those that are providing for you? And then finally, lifelong skills, lifelong learning. Sometimes learning how to cook a meal is the bump that a young person needs to know, you know what, I can learn things. I'm going to try a little bit differently in this next class. Or, you know what, I was able to master that. I think I can master this too. And all of this connects back to the third domain, which is well-being. Well-being has many different domains within it, or dimensions of well-being. And those dimensions are things like physical health, mental health. But you'll also see ideas like environmental quality supporting well-being, and then freedoms and activities, personal activities, which we already just talked a lot about. Positive well-being sets the conditions for lifelong learning. This connects to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I'm sure many of you are familiar with that framework. If you don't feel well, it is hard to learn new things because you're worried about what's in front of you. So there are three areas of well-being that we like to think about in the design of schools, and that is the quality of the space, creating the conditions for movement, and places for relationships to be built. So environments that create mental refuge, where a young person can step away and have a quiet and auditorily better environment for their needs. And color and light and texture, you'll see, is consistent throughout. Spaces that support biophilia. We innately love green and blue, so water and trees and plants. Even the light on the floor of this stairwell mimicking the light of moving through the leaves of a forest. These are things that make us feel well, and maybe an inspiring place to hear young people play violin. Things like nourishment and social connection. It was mentioned earlier that Singapore does really well on PISA tests. It also showed that they have fairly low mental health. So creating conditions for young people to connect and to still be kids in their cafeteria, which is what this was an important move in the Singapore American School. Things like natural light, so that you can fill a space with light and not have fluorescents that make you feel kind of icky. And then physical comfort. This is one of my favorite photos. This is an actual classroom in a public school in the States where all 25 students in this room have a chair or a piece of furniture that is right for them in some way. And I love this girl on the right that's standing on a balance board, it's like a skateboard, with her hand behind her back, because that's actually what she needs to get the wiggles out and to pay attention to what's being taught. And so movement, we know, actually increases test scores. It increases academic performance when it's thoughtfully incorporated into teaching and learning. There is a strong motor, physiological, mental connection. So we design spaces for joyful movement. So a teacher can use an environment in a school to incorporate movement into their teaching and learning. And sometimes the furniture in the space, I love this photo too, allows a young person to stretch and move and bend in ways that's actually helpful to their development and gets them out of that posture of being in front of a computer all day at a desk. And so the last domain of well-being that's essential is relationships. When we think about building relationships in the world of AI and technology, yes, AI can personalize learning. It allows us to do incredible things. But you are far more motivated to do something when you're asked to do it by a human that you have a relationship with. So just a quick exercise. Think of a favorite teacher. Everyone has one. Why are they your favorite teacher? It's not because you mastered content with them. It's because you had probably a really strong relationship with them. They challenged you. They asked you to do things that were hard, and you were able to achieve them. I'm sure they taught you a lot too. Right? It's probably because relationship was at the core. Now think of a teacher that maybe shouldn't have been in the profession. You probably all had one of these people in your life. Is it fair in schools that you may get stuck with a teacher for a year, or even in Slovakia, as many as 4 years, if you're not able to have a strong relationship with that educator? So the idea of the classroom model of education, I'm throwing out about 1760 is when this model was kind of established. And in this model, the idea is, I'm in Miss Smith's classroom, and I go to classroom 1. And we have these cells and bells that dictate where we go and when we go. Well, what if we rethought that model, right? What happens if Miss Smith isn't an effective teacher for you? Is there a better way to do this? So consider a more resilient and dynamic approach. What if your classroom looked different? What if you belong to a community of learners? I'm in the 5th grade community. All of these spaces are my classroom, and my teachers are Miss Smith and Miss Connell and Miss Woolacott and Miss Yang, and I can learn from all of these people at any given time. That gives more advantage to students to have more relationships and have more mentors. So you might ask, what does that look like? Well, this is a school that just opened 2 years ago. This is a public school in the United States. And this is a drone fly-through of that environment. This is the learning, the commons, and the kind of the center of the school, the social heart. This is where students come to eat. This is where adults come and do professional development. This is where big projects can spill out. You see these students doing some physics experiments with cars. It's also a place for movement and dance. They were having a dance party here this day. And then you come into this new classroom, the learning community, and you'll see that it is no longer cells and bells. It is a fluid and dynamic range of spaces, big and small, for students that have all sorts of learning needs, even the student that wants to sit on the floor by himself on a cushion, or those that are working independently. A learning studio where core direct instruction can still occur, but students owning the space, they're the ones writing on the boards, not the educator. A small group room for direct instruction and intervention, and a series of these studios and classrooms that give educators a range of environments and a range of opportunities to engage students in a range of different inspirations. You're coming back into the commons now. You see the furniture plays a big role in giving students comfort. And then towards the end of this, we're flying into one more studio, and there's a continued connection of these big and small spaces. Right? This is a different vision for what school can be, and this is not necessarily, it's innovative, but it's becoming more popular because we know that this is what's good for kids. We have variety and agility, we have focus and flow, we have intervention and extension, and we add spaces for educators to collaborate and work together. And in these environments, we cultivate belonging, which is really at the core of well-being. What makes us happy and gives us a sense of purpose. So you may be asking, what can I do, Mike? I don't have the ability to build a brand new school. Well, the environment is only an opportunity to restrict behavior, and it can reinforce behavior. But the environment by itself does not mandate what happens. So all of you have the ability to influence space. And this is just one little example. This is a space that we built. There's a young person at the back of this image with her face down into a cell phone. And there's another young person in the red at the front of this image who's looking up and out to the beautiful forest. This is an example of how the windows in this space can reinforce a behavior. We want students to look up and connect to the natural world. That's healthy for them. So we're aligning our vision for students to be well and healthy with the environment. So here's some hacks that anybody could do to make their school a little bit better for young people. 1, get outside. But don't just go outside because it sounds nice. Find a reason to go outside. Use the outdoors as a living textbook, something that students can actually appreciate and connect to that gives it purpose. 2, add natural materials to your classrooms. Things like logs, wood, plants, any type of texture and color, different lighting can really make a space feel welcoming. Find an environment in your school to make that cafe workspace. Give students an opportunity to go work there and collaborate on problems. Individualize your environments. Pods, nooks, corners, the simple blanket and a set of pillows by a window can be a space that saves a student's life in school. Stimulate students with new opportunities. You've seen this image before. These are very powerful spaces where kids can set up shop and really dig in to problems and interests that they've had. Activate a hallway or a blank corridor or a blank wall with color. Ideally, have the students do it, right? Let them own those spaces, which connects to the idea of writing on the wall. Student-owned environments are the best learning environments because students want to show up. Remember when you were in school and the teacher put your work on the wall once and you're like, wow, I feel proud. What if the entire experience for students was like that? Imagine how inspiring that can be. And then finally, make the family room. Take your dining area and add different types of furniture, different textures, different features, so that it can not only be a dining space, but a space for students to study, or maybe your community to come and work and collaborate with the school to make a better world. If you want to learn more about this, you can go to schoolpatterns.com. There's patterns like this that you can play with and imagine what might work well for our school. And I know I'm a little over time, but I want to end you with this. A school that does not meet the demands of its community will cease to exist. If we do not design schools to respond to what our society is asking young people to do, they will become irrelevant. And most schools are designed with a compliance mindset. Stuff the people in the room, tell them what they need to know, ask them if they've done it, and then move to the next topic. And we need to move to a version of school that's empowering, where students are asked to actually solve problems that matter to them so that they can see themselves in their communities and in their world as leaders and problem solvers. So this is why I do this work, is because young people rarely have a voice in determining where they go to school and when they go to school. We are the ones that make these decisions. So this is a young person that went to this community town hall with us, and we asked him to describe his ideal learning conditions. And there were 3 things he wanted. He wanted comfy pillows, he wanted a slide into his classroom and out of his classroom, and he wanted trees. So I offer to you to be the person that plants the trees for the kids, because we are the ones with the power and responsibility to actually provide joyful places for kids. They rarely can't advocate for that for themselves. So hopefully you take one thing that you've seen today and you make a move to make it happen for the children in your community. Thank you.